In this video, I'm going to do a weird video before I recap the Mets 2024 season on my computer later. That basically just recaps how the Mets at certain records didn't look back and at certain records they did. So obviously they fell to 11 games under 500 twice, both on May 29th at 22-33 and on June 2nd at 24-35. This video, we're just going to recap how at certain records they never looked back. Like for example, they were 10 under 500 after their win on June 3rd. They would never fall back to being 10 under 500 at that point, but 9 under 500 they would, because they got to that after a June 4th win to put themselves at 26 and 35. However, they fall back to that mark on June 8th at 27 and 36, and on June 11th at 28 and 37. However, following that point, they never look back at being 8 under 500, or 7, or 6, or 5, or even 4. Like, after June 17th demolition of the Texas Rangers, when they improved to a record of 33 and 37, that was the last time they were 4 under 500 the rest of the way. And of course, this is just games under 500, not games back, because obviously at the end of August, they did fall to 4 games out of playoff contention. But that was their first time that far down since June 8th when they were 9 under 500. And it was mainly because by that point, you didn't just need to be at 500 or even slightly below 500 to make the playoff picture, but instead you needed to be at like 13 over at that point and on pace for 90 wins. Of course, you didn't actually need 90 wins, you only needed 89, but still, you get my point. So for the New York Mets, obviously on June 18th they won to be at 34 and 37. Never mind. No, they were 33 and 37 on the June 16th win of the Padres. June 17th we went to 3 under, and while they would get back to being only 2 under, they'd fall back. Like June 18th to put them at 2 under, June 19th 3 under, June 21st they were back to 2 under, and then June 22nd they were 3 under. I think 36 and 39 was the record, but again, that was the last time they'd be 3 under 500. However, at this point there was a struggle, because the Mets, you see, would struggle to stay above water. Like, they'd get all the way up to 40 and 39. They'd win. They'd go up to being 1 over 500. But there'd be a struggle, you see, as they kept regressing back down. Like, they would eventually fall back to being 2 games under 500. That did happen when they lost to the Pirates on July 5th. Their record at that point had fallen to 42 and 44, despite, being as high as 40 and 39 and being 1 game over 500. They'd fall back to being 2 below. So even though, they sort of dribbled in that stretch for a while where people might recap how amazing that June was, but like from June 18th to July 5th, all they could do was break even. They went from 35 and 37 to 42 and 44 as they won and lost 7 games each in the process. I'm not saying it's an entirely fair way to look at it, but you have to realize with the Mets was that they regressed significantly late June, early July. And while I say that for like so many of these records under 500, they never looked back, that was probably the one record where they did. Like, they could never get over the hump to avoid being 2 under 500. And 1 game under 500 happened as recently as July 8th. 44 and 45. They sort of dribbled back and forth as they went to, they were 1 game under after their first win against the Yankees at 30-39, went back to being 1 under after their loss to the Astros on the 30th to put them at 40 and 41, fell back to 1 under after their loss to the Nationals on July 4th to put themselves at a 42 and 43 record, and then following their win against the Pirates on July 6th, they were back to being 1 under at 43 and 44. Then fell back to 500 to 100 on July 8th after the loss, with themselves at 44 and 45. Now we have to now look at records at 500. Like, when were the Mets exactly 500? And there were several cases of this happening. For example, they were 8-8 after their win against the Pittsburgh Pirates on April 15th. They were 13-13 after their loss to the Cardinals on April 27th. On April 29th, following their loss to the Cubs, they were 14-14. May 1st, another devastating loss to the Cubs to put themselves at 15-15. Their win over the Cardinals on May 7th allowed them to be at an 18-18 record. Following their big slump on June 26th after their win against the Yankees, they were 39-39. 40-40 after their loss to the Astros on June 29th. 41-41 at their 42-42, yeah, after their 41-41 at their win against the Nationals on the first, but their loss on the third put them at 42-42. They'd be 44-44 following their win over the Pirates on the 7th, and then following their win over the Nationals on the 9th, the Mets would find themselves at 45-45, with 433 runs both scored and against the Mets in that time. Everything was even, and this was the moment where the Mets began to finally take off and fly. Because that would be the last time the Mets were one game, were at 500. The last time they won game over 500 was when they were 46-45 the next day. 47-45 would no, that wouldn't be the last time the Mets were 2 games over 500. Because while they would eventually improve to 49-45 to be at 4 games over 500 and tie their best above 500 since they were 12-8 on April 20th, the Mets would regress again and fall back to being only 2 over, but after their loss to the Marlins, both on the 19th and on the 21st, their records respectively was 49-47 and then 50-48. And 3 over 500, yeah, you might think that they took off and went to 7 games over 500, which they did when they were 55-48. But they couldn't get to 8 over 500, and every time that they could, they just blew the opportunity. It was so frustrating as a Mets fan. They'd fall back to 55-50 and only being 5 over 500. They would then get back up to 57-50 just to go lose the next game. 58-51, they lose the next 2 to go to 58-53 and really start their concerning tailspin after a series loss to the Angels. You know, following their series win against the Rockies and their win against the Cardinals, they would improve back to 61-54. However, they lose 5 of the next 6. They go to 62-59 on August 15th, which was thankfully the last time the Mets were only 3 games over 500. But it was still very concerning as the Mets were, seemingly just in absolute free fall and were rapidly losing control of their own destiny. They were going in the wrong direction. I'll tell you that much. And you might think that, August 16th was the last time that the Mets were ever at a point where they were only 4 games over 500, which was not true. Because while on the 16th they were 64, they were 63-59, then they go to 64-59, but then they go back to 64-60, up to 65-60, down to 65-61, 65-61 at their loss on August 20th is the last time they were 4 games over 500, which really meant that you could think of April 20th to August 20th, that 4-month period, as a wash of being 500. Does not even need to be analyzed when you consider everything. Like, all that just to be 500 the whole way. Which obviously you can't be 500 over a 4-month period normally and expect to make the playoffs. You have to do superb in the other period of time. And 5 games over 500, they'd wobble between as late as August 28th when they were, after their loss, to put them at 68-63. And of course, this was very concerning because the Mets were pretty much out of it. They faded away from the postseason picture because, again, you can't expect to hover around 500. During this whole stretch, they averaged slightly below 500, seeing as in that time they only were able to achieve, like 13 wins compared to 15 losses. Like, they were tail spinning hard, and you can't do that. But then the Mets finally never looked back. Throughout their entire win streak, they never fell a 6 above 500 after their win, or 7, or 8, or 9, or 10. They were only at 64 losses for a while. Their 65th loss was elusive to the Mets. I mean, they eventually found it, following a September 8th loss. By that point, they were 78 and 65. So after that point, they never even fell to being 12 games over 500. 13, yeah, that happened a few times. They were 78 and 65, and then they went to 79 and 66, and then they went to 81 and 68. But then they took off again. They were 84 and 68 following their sweep of the Nationals at 16 games over 500, and that's what their record would finish as. They finished 16 over 500. Yes, they'd win 3 out of 4 against the Phillies to go to an amazing 87 and 69 record and be 18 games over 500, but they lose the next 2 series. They lost 3 in a row to Puerto Rico's at 87 and 72 at 15 over 500, win the next 2 to be 89 and 72, and then go 17 over 500, and then the last game was pretty much irrelevant for the Mets, as they had already clinched the playoff spot in an emphatic victory against the Atlanta Braves. The Mets, in a lot of ways, never looked back, but in a lot of ways they did too, as you saw them, these tailspins, both at the end of June into the beginning of July, they tailspinned, and they tailspinned hard in August.